Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Right or Die Show. I am your host, Randi-lee. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking to Elliot Mason. Welcome, Elliot. So excited to have you on the show.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Good to be here.
Tell us a little bit about who Elliot is.
I am a writer, suspense thriller novelist mainly. I deal with a lot of historical fiction. Started writing when I was very young, but never had the confidence to do it beyond that. Just little things, stories I wrote to myself. And throughout high school, my parents kept on encouraging me to continue writing. And I kind of took on the challenge when I got into college. And then I did blog writing and website and promotional stuff, but didn't take on the idea of actually writing a novel till, later in life. I'm 54 now, so that tells you I came out with my first novel just a few years ago. So it was a challenge I didn't take on till later in life.
Yeah, but you've always had a passion for it by the sounds of it.
I've always had a passion for it, and I've always had a love of writing, and it's something that I've always enjoyed. It's kind of my way of expressing. I always felt I did much better writing something out than actually talking. So it was.
Yes, me too. Sometimes if I had to tell somebody something instead of saying it, I would just write it out because that's how I communicate best. All right. So what kind of mental health have you dealt with?
A lot of anxiety issues. It was something that I was very, very shy growing up. I had a lot of anxiety issues that would sometimes lead into depression. I would have these, I guess you would say, these kind of pressure that I would put on myself, and I just never dealt with it well growing up, and it sometimes led to anxiety attacks and things of that nature that led into later on where I was suffering sometimes from depressive episodes. But it was that was mainly what it was dealing with, was just this constant anxiety, and I don't know if you would call it a sense of impending doom, but that's what it always would happen, and it was not based in any reality. It was just how I felt.
Okay. So when you would have a panic attack, what would happen to you, to your mind, to your body?
Oh, I break out sweating. I get really short of breath. I start to shake. These type of things where I would always start with my hand twitching a little bit, and once it got to that point, I knew I couldn't really stop it. And I later learned that actually trying to fight it was making it worse. So yeah, just I should have allowed myself just to go through the process. I think a lot of times anxiety is caused, at least from what I've learned in talking to people, anxiety is caused from trying to control stuff you can't control.
Controlling the uncontrollable.
Which is what most goes on in our life, right? We're always trying to control these things in our life that a person once told me, trying to control people, places, and things is the quickest way to anxiety. And
that's smart.
Yeah, very smart. And so as I got older, I got better at not trying to control these things, and eventually those things would dissipate. But it took me a long time. It took me years before I was actually able to get them under control, because I was always trying to figure out ways of controlling the anxiety, or controlling the symptoms of it, rather than just focusing on the cause and moving forward.
That's really important, because symptoms, they can be devastating, and we do have to take care of them at times, especially if it is, say, breaking out sweating. But if you don't get to that root cause, you're never going to be able to get rid of it.
That's true. That's true. If you're continuing to focus on the symptoms rather than the cause, it just makes things worse. It prolongs the process needlessly, really. But I think because sometimes the anxiety attacks are so uncomfortable physically, mm-hmm. that or at least I tended to fear them. So I was always trying to control them. And I think maybe it's a natural reaction that when something's unpleasant, we try to control the symptom. And so we fight it. And what I found is that fighting it does nothing to help me.
Mm.
That I just need to let the process happen. And the more I let it happen, the less it scared me. And then the fear went away and I stopped trying to control it. And they tended to dissipate. So I very rarely have any problem with it anymore.
That is excellent. Because that obviously is going to lead me into more questions about how did you learn to deal with it?
Yeah.
So how did you figure that out, that you needed to kind of breathe and just let things kind of happen?
I actually got some professional help for it because I was struggling with it as a kid, and it wasn't finally until I'm in my adulthood I'm going, I've been dealing with these things for years, and I got to figure out a way to deal with this more constructively because these other methods I'm using are obviously not working.
Mhm.
And I went to somebody who basically tried to said, look, just it was kind of interesting. The first time, I had, when my hand started to shake, he said, give permission for your hand to shake more. And that was the thing that was kind of, a light bulb kind of went off in my head going, I never thought of that. Why would I want to encourage something that's unpleasant to happen more? And it was focusing. I think a lot of times with anxiety, especially if they come out in things like anxiety attacks, that we tend to focus on okay, what are you thinking about when you're having the attack, rather than just saying, you know what, I'm going to concentrate on what I'm feeling physically. So, my feeling, tightness in my chest or sweating or tightness in the shoulders or all those things that we associate with anxiety.
Yeah.
And he just said, give yourself to feel it more. I want you to feel more of that. I wanted it to be even more uncomfortable. And what he was doing was he was basically getting me used to it to where I no longer feared it. The fear dissipated because I was actually fearing the attack. And so after a while, when I realized, and my body kind of realized that nothing bad was going to happen,
Yeah.
the fear went away. And when it went away, the attack started to dissipate. So it was focusing on giving myself permission to feel even worse at that moment. The hard part is getting over that hump because it's so antithetical to what we think and how we want to react. If we're feeling uncomfortable, if we're feeling pain, we want to stop the pain, right? That's the most logical thing.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of how I overcame it, and
That's cool. It makes me think of like that immersion therapy for people who are like scared of, say, spiders or something, and you get a little closer to it, a little closer to it. Now, I'm scared of spiders and I don't ever plan to go to that kind of therapy. Spiders can still stay away from me, but that's kind of what I was thinking of when you were explaining it.
Yeah, I guess in a way it's very similar to that. Except you're just dealing with internal things. And in a way with phobias, you're dealing with internal fear. A phobia is an irrational fear or something.
Exactly.
Attacks cause you begin to have, or at least I did, and I think a lot of people do, have an irrational fear of the attack. So what we do is we tend to kind of put on the brakes and push it down and try to make it more, try to push it, force it down, push it away.
Try to appear on the outside, try to appear like you're not freaking out.
Absolutely. And I understand that, especially when I was a kid, because they were embarrassing. I didn't know what was happening, and you're embarrassed because you feel like you've lost control of yourself. And it took years of soul searching, but that was interesting. When my therapist told me that, just let it go, let it, feel it. Give yourself permission. I want to shake more. It really was like an aha moment. Like, really, that's what you want me to do? It was kind of, it was completely the opposite of everything I had thought. We're not going to talk about what my thoughts are when I'm happy. He goes, thoughts are irrelevant. Thoughts are irrelevant.
I like it. Yeah, I had never heard of it being used for like anxiety and stuff. I've always heard of like the phobia thing.
Right.
That is very cool. And I'm so glad that it helped you.
Oh yeah, it was an immense help. And because it was always a prevalent part of my life, and
Yeah.
I didn't want to be anymore. So I decided to, hey, say, you know what, I need to get away from this. I need to,
Mhm.
uh,
How young were you when you had your first panic attack?
I was about 15, I think.
Okay.
And 14, 15 years old, I had my first one, and it was, I didn't know what was happening. It scared me. I thought there was something physically wrong with me, because, I had never felt anything like that before. And I was almost afraid to tell anyone about it because I was embarrassed, but at the same time, and, this is a long time ago. This is in the
Mhm.
80s. And people didn't really talk about things like that in the 80s.
Yes.
It was just something that that wasn't discussed,
Exactly.
and I always thought of it as, well, if you have an anxiety attack, it means you're not able to handle the world, you're weak, and
That's what I used to tell myself about depression.
mhm.
You're weak, you can't handle it, you're broken. That was just like on repeat in my brain. So I totally get where you're coming from with that one.
No question, no question. And it was something that really affected me because it prevented me, that flawed thinking process prevented me from
Yeah.
seeking help earlier. And it was something that I, even after getting help for it, I still thought of myself as broken, weak. And it wasn't until later on when I realized what I was doing to myself that I kind of said, you know what, I don't care what I think. And yeah, 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 exactly. And there was another doctor that one time said something that was really cool to me that I actually have quoted in some of my stories. What you feel is real, but ain't necessarily true. And
Oh, I like that. I am
yeah,
not yawning because I'm bored. I just cannot seem to get enough oxygen into my body. I'm sorry. I feel like I've yawned 15 times and I'm actually having a really good conversation. And I feel like I needed to tell you that.
no, no, no worries, no worries. Not a big deal. But yeah, that's true. Is that also brought to light, things that, okay, I'm not doubting you feel that way. I'm not saying that you're lying about your feelings or lying about these things.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it's not based in any truth. And
Yeah.
and that was a big difference too, because I think a lot of times, and I think this goes for a lot of people who struggle with anxiety or depression or other types of mental conditions, that affect them. I think that a lot of times we think that people are doubting us, or that they're
Yeah.
doubting. And this, the way he said it was, he says, I'm not doubting what you're saying. Your feelings are there. I acknowledge those. It's just, it's not based in any truth. So I kind of okay, this guy is, he's at least not doubting what I'm feeling. He's just saying, look, your perception of reality is not correct here.
I love that. And perception is everything. I 90% of people that come on the show mention perception at some point in the interview.
Right.
And it just goes to show you that it plays a huge part in our lives, is how
Oh,
we view something, right? It's like, I always remember this picture that I saw in a psychology book in college, and it's the number 6, right? And one person's standing looking at it from the below, and somebody's standing up above it and looking at it, so it looks like a 9 to them, but it's a 6 to you, and they're arguing about it. And ultimately it's both, right? And
right.
that's kind of like this. Yeah, you're feeling what you're feeling, which is fine, but reality dictates that no, it's not true. But you know what, both can be true in this moment, that you're feeling this way, but it's also not based on fact, but both things are true.
Right. And it goes back to what you were saying about the phobias, right? People might fear spiders, as you say, arachnophobia, I guess that would be called. And yeah, and yet, no, it's one thing to be, and make you uncomfortable, but to have an irrational fear. And it's not to
Yeah,
say that the fear doesn't exist, but your feelings towards that are not based in any real danger to you.
exactly.
And so that's kind of I think that's kind of where so much of, I think, the way we perceive the world
Mm-hmm.
has an effect on us, and how we process that,
Yeah.
and I think what I always say to people is that I think the most important thing we do when we're addressing things that might cause us depression or anxiety or other types of problems is that we have to be willing to look at another perspective of how to look at it, and not just doubt and not just base it in what we think our reality is.
Yes, I like that. Especially if you're trying to figure out a situation and
Right, right,
it deals with another person, especially when it deals with another person, because you have to view it from your side, their side, what the facts are of the situation, and come to terms with it.
right, right.
How old were you when you finally went to therapy?
Well, I started going when I was, in my late teens, or actually
Okay.
mid-teens, when I started going because my family was worried about me. But I continued on for many years. But I think part of the problem too is I wasn't even honest in therapy on, because I was,
Mm,
and that's a I think that's a little talked about problem, and something that I think that when we talk about, you know, oftentimes people say, well, you're not being honest with, your friends or your families or your
yeah.
significant other, right? Those type of things. And that's good. But I think a lot of times people go in and they're not even honest with their therapist because
Yeah.
they still haven't gotten over this idea of I'm being judged.
That is such a true point. And part of that is I think that they're not being honest with themselves. Because now I'm thinking back to when I went to therapy. And at the time I was saying it out loud, in my head, I'm saying, yes, this is true. But as she would ask more questions, and I would say, okay, well, that's not maybe 100% true. Maybe it's how I want to perceive it. But really what's happening is this other thing.
Right, right. I agree. And I think part of the nature is too, is that, and I don't know how many people this happens to, but I think there's almost like this idea that somehow there's this inquisition going on here. And
Yes.
it's almost like, because, I mean, you may get used to therapy, but there's almost a sense that I think a lot of us create in our mind that it's judge and jury, that we're sitting there and you get this person asking you questions and you're sitting alone in the chair. And, again, that goes back to perception of, do I have the hot lights on me? And, what do you know? And
Yeah.
I think there's a part of that limits our, our ability to get better. And I think in some senses, there are therapists who are not good out there, that feeling is justified. But if you find someone that you trust, who's really good at what they do, and you feel helps you, that's a part that you have to work to get over. And I know I did. And it took me a long time because I was always very much on the defensive, because even the idea of going to therapy to deal with my issue made me feel weaker. So I was already on the defensive. I already had my dukes up when I went into sessions, and it wasn't confrontational. I could play the part really well, like smile and say, yeah, you're right. Or, but
Mhm.
internally I was not doing, internally I wasn't buying it. And
Yeah.
that was my loss. That was my fault, because I did see people who were very capable who could have helped me earlier on, but I was just not. I think in some senses that the person who's receiving therapy has to take on the responsibility themselves as much as their therapist. I think
Yeah.
there's this idea that, oh, I'm going to place all the responsibility on the therapist and they're going to get me better, and I just have to sit here and answer questions.
Yeah. It
And
doesn't work.
it doesn't work that way. And I think the minute that we start to move forward and say, look, I have a responsibility here too. He can only, or she can only help me as much as I'm willing to move forward.
Yes, that is such a good point. They can only guide you, but
Right.
you have to drive the car. They
Yeah.
have the roadmap, you have the steering wheel.
And it's a good analogy, because if they're driving and I'm always pulling on the parking brake, we're not going to go anywhere. And that's basically what I was doing for many years, was I was pulling on the parking brake, and I
So
wasn't doing myself favors.
what happened for you to finally realize I need to be more honest, or whatever it was that actually put you over into the side of getting the proper help?
There wasn't a lightning bolt moment. I think I went through in my early 30s a very profound time, and even of just this, I don't know how to say this, profound anxiety that even lasted into my 40s.
Oh,
And I finally, after, just being exhausted because as you get older, the anxiety, it's like anything else. Things are harder on you physically. You don't
Yeah,
recover from things as quickly.
it's true.
And I, I got tired of just being beat up by these things. And finally I just said, this is not, enough's enough. It's impacting the people I care about. It's impacting my life to the point where I can't function at my highest ability. I need to do something about this. Because I would try to do it with other ways. I would try to, I was a workaholic, so I would work 16 hours a day, 17 hours a day, would never sleep. And I'm doing everything I can to burn off the energy some other way, and it just was not working. And so I just finally said enough's enough. It wasn't so much like there was this one definitive moment. It was just like, okay, I got to do something about this. I can't live like this anymore. It's been years and nothing's worked. I got to do something and be more honest about this.
Yeah. So it's almost like as we get older, we get wiser.
Right.
That's what I was trying to get to, is that with age comes wisdom. So it might not have been a profound moment, but you had learned enough in life or experienced enough in life that you're like, okay, I'm taking control now. Give me that driver's seat. Let's do this.
Absolutely. And I think, a little bit, from maybe wisdom, but just really just exhausted. Exhaustion was the thing that was really pushing me. I just couldn't function that way. I mean, I couldn't live every day worried about anxiety like I was, and these attacks and things of that nature, that I finally just said, hey, I got to do something. I got to change my approach here, because whatever it is I'm doing hasn't worked. And it hasn't.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and that's a really good point, is that people, they keep trying things because, oh, well, Jim down the street says that yoga is supposed to be really soothing. And yoga is for a lot of people. Doesn't mean it is for everybody. Right. So if you keep telling yourself, yeah, but Jim says this and Jim says this and whatever, you keep doing it, it's not working for you. Try something new.
and you're right. Try something new. And, I was doing things, but they helped, but they just didn't solve the problem. And, I wanted to solve the problem. I wanted to get past just, pacifying the problem or putting a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage.
That's what I was going to say.
And I wanted to get past that point. And so I finally just said, okay, it's time.
So what are the things that you had then learned when you finally decided it was time? What coping skills did you learn that really worked for you?
Well, there were certain things in my, that would trigger anxiety. And the coping skill basically was, and going back to what he said originally, was to, instead of fighting it, the idea was to basically fight the reaction to fight it, or fight, my inclination to fight it. That was the heart, so if I had a bad dream that caused me anxiety, a lot of times I would wake up from this bad dream, and I would, and it was just say, okay, I would have to go through the process. What am I feeling right now? Okay, my chest is heavy, my neck is tight, whatever. Okay, just absorb that feeling, allow it to come over myself. And then I started using my writing more for letting out some of the anxiety or whatever the emotion was. So I would write, oftentimes I would write those into my characters. I would write, if I had arguments with myself, I would write out those arguments. And
smart.
That helped. And I would always do it longhand. A lot of people, they like to type things out. But longhand forced me to slow down my thinking to where I was really looking at my thought process. And when I looked at my thought process, I could read it again. And I'd go, okay, here's where I see I'm not making sense here, or here's where I'm going off the rails here, and I need to get back on track.
That is such a good idea. I love writing stuff out longhand, unless I'm actually working, and then I don't want to have to write it out longhand, just type it out after. But when I'm doing it for me, I like actually writing it, the feel of it.
Right. I hear you. I love the feel of it. And for me, uh, just the process, I think very quickly. That's just
Mhm.
how I am. I talk fast. I, think quickly. And by forcing myself out longhand, it really did force me to slow down because
Yeah.
because I can type out words much faster than I can write them. So if I can slow down and, just really go through the process. And the other thing they've done, and they've done studies on this, is that people who, and even when I write my books, I write out longhand.
Yeah.
They've done studies that the process of actually writing actually fires the creative centers of the brain.
Oh,
That typing does not. And so whenever I write my stories, I always write things out longhand first, and then I convert it to a typewritten document. But
ah,
that I think it really helps.
that's very cool. Yeah, that's kind of some cool information there.
Yeah.
What would you tell somebody who is listening right now and having a panic attack?
I would say don't fear it. That would be the first thing. Don't fear the panic attack. It's not going to hurt you. I mean, it feels like death is coming. That's the hard part, is that you feel like in the severe panic attacks, you feel like you're going to die. You are not going to die, and it's almost like this fear of, I need to run somewhere, but where you're going to run to, you can't escape yourself. So it's don't fear it, and it's not a weakness. It's basically your body reacting to you holding on to control. Give it up. Give up control. Stop trying to control everything. And that's, that was me. I was trying to control every aspect of things that I had either no control or no business thinking I should have control of. So give up that control. Allow yourself to feel what you're feeling and give into it,
Yeah.
because the more you fight it, the worse it gets. And that's the other thing I found. The more I fought the onslaught of the attack, the worse the physical effects were. So as long as I let it go, I started to feel better. And it's going to take a while. The hard part is being patient, because it doesn't, you don't snap your finger, because you're going to have to go through it many times
Yeah,
before
yeah,
you actually got it down to where it starts to dissipate. And I think in our instant gratification society that we live in, we want things, you snap
yeah,
your fingers and it to happen. It doesn't happen that way. It took you, the way to look at it is, it took you years to get this way. It's going to take you more than once to get rid of some of these symptoms. So what I always tell people is, don't fear it, let it happen. You're not going to die. Focus on the sensation, the physical sensations. Don't worry about the thoughts that
okay.
trigger it. Just focus, because what you're trying to focus on doing is deal with the problem first. What's the problem? The problem is you're having these attacks or these anxiety problems. All right, those are physical symptoms. Focus on getting rid of those first. Then you can focus on the other stuff, the thought process that might have led to it. But if you get rid of the fear of the symptoms, you can then have a better ability to deal with the underlying issues.
Hmm, very good advice. I like that. And where can people find your books?
They can go to elliottmasonbooks.com and then click on books or shop, and it'll take you right. My books are available on Amazon. They're available on Barnes & Noble website, Target, you name it. They're pretty much all over the place.
Excellent. And where can people follow you?
Again, they can go to my website, elliottmasonbooks.com. I have a newsletter. All they have to do is click on the newsletter. They fill in their name and email address, and they'll get a newsletter about once a month, depends on what's going on, but about once a month, I try to stay in contact with my readers.
Excellent. And all of those links will be down in the description below, so you can very easily find Elliot, give him a follow, find his books. So thank you so very much for being on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was good talking with you.
That was such a great interview. Elliot had some really awesome pointers. He learned some really valuable tools in therapy that it was so nice that he was able to share it with all of us. Make sure that you give him some love down below. Follow him, check out his books, see what's available that would pique your interest. As well, hit that like and subscribe button here at the channel if you have not already, because you never want to miss an episode, of course. Share this out to everyone. If you are part of the Patreon page, then there will be some behind the scenes footage released at some point. And of course, we do have a merch store with some really cool designs. 10% of the proceeds from those sales will go directly to the Canadian Mental Health Association. Remember, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly. Bye.